How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Hello, America. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the nation. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I would be very happy to have you. I want to talk about, well, actually, you know what? I want to talk about something else first. Let's talk about the Boeing guy. I'm assuming you guys have heard the Boeing whistleblower is dead. Obviously, because of the age we live in, people immediately rushed to conspiracy theories. Many of you right now are like, but Erickson, why not? John Barnett, he worked for Boeing for 32 years. He's been a thorn in the side of Boeing. 62-year-old supposedly died of self-inflicted gunshot wound on March 9th. Police are investigating. He was a quality manager at the North Charleston plant that makes the 787 Dreamliner. Now, bear with me here. I think the odds of Boeing having killed this guy, as many people online are speculating, are slim to none. Why? Because he's been a whistleblower since 2017. You telling me that only now in 2024 have they decided that it's time to take the guy out when he hasn't been there in forever? Hasn't been like having updated secrets. So they let him do all the damage he did from 2017 to now, and now suddenly that doesn't make any sense. However, it's North Charleston. I'm not saying the guy wasn't killed because it's Charleston. Do y'all know what the murder rate in North Charleston is? They're saying it's self-inflicted, but so this is the funny world we live in now. You hear a story like this, and everyone immediately says, "Oh, clearly wasn't suicide. Clearly wasn't suicide." The amount of people who want to believe the conspiracy theory has gone through the roof. And there are a lot of people these days, I encounter them all the time, well, all the conspiracies turned out to be right. I see it all the time. I got friends of mine on Instagram and Twitter, they post the memes. It turns out all the conspiracy theories are right. No, there weren't conspiracy theories. People called them conspiracy theories. It's just a bunch of idiot experts got it wrong and refused to admit it. That's not a conspiracy theory. It's not even a cover-up. It's a bunch of arrogant people who lied and now they're getting caught. That's not a conspiracy theory. To say that Boeing or someone killed this guy, that is a conspiracy theory. That is a conspiracy theory. That some group targeted this guy for assassination when there's no proof of it. That being said, I'm not dismissing the fact he could have been murdered because it's Charleston, but I am dismissing the fact it was Boeing that did it because he's been a whistleblower since 2017. He's now like retiring from blowing the whistle because he's got nothing left to blow the whistle on, and now suddenly they take him out at the end of this whistleblowing career? No, I don't think so. At the same time, my gosh, Boeing. I got to circle back to this because it's been a pet peeve of mine for a while, the amount of people who wanted to rush in and blame DEI on Boeing's failures. It becomes the sort of epistemic thought process. Well, guy I follow online says it's DEI and looks like they got a DEI program, and I think DEI sucks, therefore DEI caused that Alaska Airlines door to fall off. No, that's such simplistic, dumb thinking by people online. Let me explain to you the problem with Boeing. McDonnell Douglas fell on hard times. McDonnell Douglas built the DC-10, which I always thought was a cool jet, and then the MD-11 after it. Built a number of the MD-88, Delta flew a lot of those, and it fell on hard times. And Boeing decided to buy McDonnell Douglas and absorb it in. McDonnell Douglas, one of the reasons that McDonnell Douglas had problems was McDonnell Douglas was run by a bunch of bean counters who put accounting efficiencies ahead of quality control. So though Boeing bought and merged with McDonnell Douglas's bean counters took over Boeing and brought and infected Boeing with the McDonnell Douglas way of life. And so Boeing, which used to put in all sorts of quality controls and the like, suddenly became a bean counting organization where if you talk to any of the engineers at Boeing, and I have, many of you who blame DEI haven't done this. I've actually talked to engineers at Boeing, and they say the profound cultural shift at Boeing that's happened over the last more than decade has seen Boeing cutting corners to save money on everything. And it's been all about accounting and the bottom line. Had nothing to do with DEI. Had everything to do with the accounting bottom line at Boeing. Boeing cut corners. They outsourced their safety and security to third parties, sometimes even out of this country. They outsourced some of the manufacturing facilities that they're now having to buy back because of problems at the outsourced facilities. They outsourced as much as they could. I mean, the 787 is an engineering marvel. It uses also batteries to make itself more efficient. It's got these big lithium-ion batteries. They put it all together in Charleston, South Carolina, but the wings and everything, they're all made around the world. Everything's brought together in South Carolina where they piece it together. And it's got some problems. So the whistleblower, Mr. Barnett, uncovered, for example, problems with the oxygen systems on the 787 meant 1 in 4 breathing masks wouldn't work in an emergency. He told the BBC that workers had failed to follow procedures intended to track components through the factory, allowing defective components to go missing. He said in some cases, substandard parts had even been removed from scrap bins and fitted to planes that were being built to prevent delays on the production line. He also claimed that tests on emergency oxygen systems due to be fitted to the 787 showed a failure rate of 25%. Boeing denied his assertions, but a 2017 review by regulators and the FAA upheld some of Barrett's concerns. It established that the location of at least 53 non-conforming parts in the factory were unknown and considered lost, and Boeing was ordered to take remedial action. On the oxygen cylinders issue, the company said in 2017 it identified some oxygen bottles received from its supplier were not deploying properly, but it denied any of them were actually fitted on aircraft. After retiring, he embarked on a long-running legal action against the company, accusing it of denigrating his character and hampering his career because of issues he pointed out. He was actually in Charleston for legal interviews related to the case and gave a formal deposition in which he was questioned by Boeing's lawyer and his own lawyer. Boeing has problems. I don't think Boeing would stoop to murder a guy who's been a thorn in their side since 2017, waiting until 2024 to do it. But Boeing's got problems. It cut too many quarters. Building planes are expensive. And, you know, we've set up this whole import-export bank that gives Boeing subsidies, essentially. The entire existence of the import-export bank has a lot to do with Boeing's manufacturing. And yet, despite all of that and all the government's help, Boeing still decided it needed to cut corners, and it puts real lives in jeopardy. They make great planes. You know, the 737, not the MAX, just the 737, one of the safest planes, if not the safest plane around, that and the 777. The 777 is today my favorite airplane. My favorite used to be the 747 and the Lockheed TriStar. I miss the TriStar. It's the other one that had the Delta flew a lot of them, had the engine on the back and kind of an S-curve. Wasn't the DC-10 had just the solid engine on the back. That was made by McDonnell Douglas. The Lockheed TriStar I thought was a great plane, had a brilliant safety record. The 777 has a brilliant safety record. Other than one Malaysian Airjet went missing and another got shot down by the Russians, it's got a fantastic safety record. But the Boeing 737 is the most popular plane in the world. It's super safe, but the MAX has just destroyed the reputation of it because Boeing decided to cut corners and to sacrifice quality controls and to sacrifice inspections. Boeing is now at this weird stage where when things happen, Boeing's getting the blame. So I don't know if y'all saw this. A United Airlines jet had a wheel fall off at takeoff. Someone was actually videoing the plane. They caught it in real time. The wheel fell off. That's not a Boeing problem. That's the airline's problem. Boeing didn't put that wheel on that plane. The engineers for the airline did, and yet Boeing's going to get the blame for it because it's Boeing. And then another jet somewhere, I think in Hawaii, I think I read, it ran off the runway. And, of course, Boeing's going to get the blame for that one, too, because now we're in this weird situation with Boeing where when anything bad happens and it's a Boeing plane, of course, Boeing's going to get the blame because these doors came off the plane. And not only did the door come off the plane, but then they started looking at other Boeing 737 MAXs and found loose bolts on all these other planes as well. Serious issues. And thank goodness no one was, what? Stop, Siri, stop. Siri's yelling at me across the room. Boeing really needs to step up its image at this point. Having this man's tragic death, suicide, or murder only compounds its problems. The company needs real damage control. And you know the damage control that Boeing needs? Honesty. And spending resources on quality control inspectors and things like that. The things big corporations don't like to do anymore is spend money on stuff. We've reached this age, this McKinsey consulting age, where they hire the McKinsey consultants who come in and find ways for them to wring profit out of everything and cut costs or save money. McKinsey consultants, I know a couple, they're very nice people, but it seems like all the bad ideas coming out of corporate America now are because they hired McKinsey to come up with ideas to monetize. So you have GM getting rid of CarPlay, forcing you to use its in-house system. You have Roku, and I'm not saying McKinsey's to blame for all this stuff, but it's the sort of stuff they would come up with. And with Boeing, well, let's just outsource quality control to third parties in India and nonsense like that. They've got major damage to their reputation. Major damage to their reputation. They're going to have to do something. And one of the things that I think they need to do is to be willing to stop nickel and diming the process. Companies have responsibilities to shareholders, and shareholders want to profit. But if your profit and your responsibility to shareholders is coming at the loss of life of people on planes and the loss of trust in your company, that's a real problem. It seems like corporate America has lost their way in the last number of years. They've gone down this weird DEI road where they think as long as they can check the boxes on their diversity, equity, and inclusion, nothing else matters. That's what everybody wants. And no, what people want is to not die when they fly somewhere. And thankfully, that hasn't happened with the Boeing jet. But people are, in the last few years in this country, but let's not forget what happened with the 737 MAXs in other countries. And let's not forget, nobody has died from this latest round of problems with Boeing. In fact, we haven't had multiple aviation losses in this country in more than a decade. Flying has gotten very safe in this country. But it's flying. It's a somewhat exotic way to travel that seems unnatural. People are concerned about it. And Boeing, when those concerns get going, has not done what it should do to reassure people that it's a company that has it together. In fact, everything Boeing has done has made it seem less and less a company that has it together and more a company that, by the grace of God alone, people haven't died. Hello, my friends. I hope you're doing well. Do not forget, you too can get tickets to our annual conference. All you have to do is text the word ENGAGE to 33777. Now, what is our annual conference? In August, we try to get all of our listeners from around the country together in person to hear from some of the leading luminaries of the conservative movement. So here's who we're inviting. No, they haven't accepted. Well, a couple of them have accepted, but not all of them. We are going to invite the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. My buddy, Congressman Chip Roy. We always invite Chip. I want to invite Ted Cruz. That's his election year from Texas. Greg Gianforte, the governor of Montana. Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia. I want to invite Kim Reynolds, the governor of Iowa, as well. Tom Cotton, Nikki, Joni Ernst. Who else? Rich McCormick from Georgia. We'll have a number of great people from around the country. I'm going to reach out to the chairman of the RNC as well. It is an election year, presidential election year. We should see if the chairman of the Republican Party will come hang out with us. The format, which I love, is you guys submit questions in advance, and then I have a conversation with the people on stage and weave your questions into the conversation. So there's no filibustering, there's no speechifying. It's a come sit with me, have a conversation, answer the questions from people around the country who are conservatives, and it should be a great time. It'll be August 8th through the 11th in Atlanta, Georgia. 8th through the 11th in Atlanta, Georgia. You get a hotel discount there at the Grand Hyatt in Buckhead. All you have to do is text the word engage to 33777, and I will send you back a link so you can get a ticket to the gathering that happens in August. I'm really excited about this year's conference, and it'll come between the Republican and the Democratic conventions as well. So it'll be a fun time, a lot of media exposure as well. The phone number here, 877-973-7425. When we come back, I will take calls. Just be patient. We also are going to have to talk about crime. You know, most cities are seeing a decline in crime, except for one notable exception. Washington, D.C., a 35% increase in homicide, even as there's been a 39% increase in violent crime overall, and a massive decline elsewhere. National homicide rate dropped 15%, but in Washington it has spiked 35%, with overall violent crime up 39%. In Pittsburgh, it sounds like they're having a purge. In Pittsburgh, they've decided to get rid of the police at night. There will be no police in police precincts, and they'll be down to like 20 to 30 total police officers working overnight in Pittsburgh, and they're no longer going to respond to burglary alarms or theft calls or anything like that in the middle of the night. Absolutely insane. It is totally the purge coming to Pittsburgh thanks to progressive policies. We'll get into all of that when we come back and take your phone calls, 877-973-7425. Breaking news, Congressman Ken Buck, a Colorado Republican, is resigning a week from Friday, he says. March 22nd, he will resign. He has been more and more on the outs with members of his own conference, and, well, that'll take the Republican majority down to basically a one-seat majority. They will have some replacements coming in, so they'll get back up to like a 2-3 seat majority here soon, but makes it hard to get anything done. Now, phone number 877-973-7425. Ron's been waiting from Stroud, Oklahoma. Welcome to the show, Ron.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing good.
What's going on?
Oh, I just wanted to call on the Boeing topic and say that I've worked with their engineers and can certainly attest to the comment you had about the corner cutting. You know, problem comes up and they kind of address it, but not all the way through, and don't necessarily fully resolve things like you would think they would as an aviation company.
Yeah, that's real reassuring.
Isn't it?
Gosh, yeah. So it does seem every engineer that I've talked to at Boeing, and I know several, and several have reached out because I'm out on the West Coast and where they've got some of their facilities, and they've reached out and they said it's constant accounting concerns and bean counter concerns, and at the sacrifice of quality control in their minds.
Absolutely. Would agree completely. You know, you mentioned most people probably haven't spoke with their engineers, but anyone that has, like you said, it's certainly apparent.
Yeah. Gosh. Well, look, I appreciate it. It's frustrating because they're a good company, and frankly, we need Boeing as a nation. We need Boeing, but I think they've kind of let that go to their head, that in some capacity we need them as an American industry, and so we're going to keep giving them a pass. We can't keep giving them a pass. It's not good. Now, we can't give local officials a pass either. I'm going to play this. This is from Channel 11 News in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I want you to hear this. This news report is about a minute and a half. And I want you to hear this. I don't want to exert it. I don't want to explain it. I just want you to hear the local news in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for yourself. This is The Purge.
Rick, what was the big takeaway today?
Yeah, Susan, residents of the city will see a major change in the way police respond. They will no longer respond to calls that aren't considered in-progress emergency. That means calls like criminal mischief, theft, harassment, and most burglary alarms will all be handled by an enhanced telephone reporting unit. That means residents will file a police report over the phone. Officers will not respond unless it's an emergency. Also, between the hours of 3 a.m. and 7 a.m., there will be no officers at any of the 6 stations throughout the city. Call boxes that link directly to 911 have been installed for people to use in case of an emergency. And during the overnight shift, there will be as few as 20 officers to cover the entire city. The chief said today the data supports that.
Yes, it's enough to cover the entire city in those hours when we have 8% of the time people are calling. I'm confident in the decisions that we make that it impacts this bureau and the city in a much better way than we have in the past.
Now, the chief also acknowledging today that some of these changes are due to staffing shortages. He's down to 740 officers, well below the 850 they would like to have. Now, coming up new at 5, residents, city council, and the police.
Well, they'll all chime in. Okay, let me go back to the police chief. His name is Larry Scarrato, and I may be butchering his name. Just listen to his voice. This is the beauty of the medium of radio. You can't see his face. Just listen to his voice and ask yourself, do you think he really believes what he's saying? Listen to this.
Yes, it's enough to cover the entire city in those hours when we have 8% of the time people are calling. I'm confident in the decisions that we make that it impacts this bureau and the city in a much better way than we have in the past.
I don't think he believes what he's saying. Notice the hesitation before he uses the word better way. No, there's no way. There will not be police at police stations in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. Can you imagine the first time someone gets killed on the steps of a police station who's being chased and the door is locked and they can't get in for protection? Buy guns. Buy ammunition. Protect yourself. The purge is coming. And during the day now, the police are not going to show up for thefts, harassment, criminal mischief, or burglary alarms. What are the taxpayers of Pittsburgh getting? And this comes as the left-wing site Axios has this headline today: blue states go red with conservative policies on crime. In New York City, Governor Kathy Hochul recently ordered hundreds of National Guard troops to address crime in the city subways. Oregon has decided to recriminalize possession of drugs such as heroin, cocaine, and fentanyl 3 years after becoming the first state to decriminalize possession and personal use of all drugs. San Francisco voters approved 2 ballot measures to expand police surveillance and impose drug screenings for those receiving welfare benefits. Washington, D.C. is even reversing its crime policies and adding new penalties for thefts and gun crimes. And New Mexico's governor has one of the highest rates of killings by police is New Mexico, and the governor is threatening to call a special legislative session for more anti-crime measures. Karen Bass is the mayor of Los Angeles. She was a progressive member of Congress. She says, my number one job is to keep Angelenos safe, and I don't think it's helpful for our city to be losing officers by the thousands. She's pushing for pay raises for police and hiring bonuses to combat a shortage of police after a spike in violent crime. What's notable is that she used to be a defund the police supporter. Now, here's where the media screws up. And of course, the left-wing Axios would go to this. The perception of crime remains high. 63% of Americans say crime in the U.S. is very or extremely serious. But Violent crime has fallen back down to 2019 levels after spiking during the pandemic. Here's the problem. Outside of murder, rape, violent crimes, a lot of people aren't even reporting the crimes anymore. A lot of businesses aren't reporting shopliftings anymore. And so in places like San Francisco, they're declaring shoplifting is in decline, but actually shoplifting is not in decline. Just reports of shoplifting are in decline because it's not a prosecutable crime in San Francisco anymore, unless they're stealing over $1,000. So a lot of businesses aren't reporting it. So the unreporting of crime doesn't mean crime has gone down. Now, there are signs. Like, for example, I was in Washington, D.C. last week, where crime is still a problem. Murder has skyrocketed. Violent crime, rape, they've all skyrocketed. But I was asking the Uber driver on the way from the airport, like, how bad is the crime? He says it's not as bad now as it was a few months ago. It's gone back down because they've upped police in areas where tourists go. He said, so you'll be fine in the areas you go, but in the areas you don't go, you're not going to be crime. So what they did in Washington, D.C., there was a spillover effect. The northwest section of Washington, that's where you go from the Capitol, the White House is in the northwest section, Pennsylvania Avenue, the tourist areas are in the northwest section, the National Cathedral, Georgetown, all those things, they're in northwest section of Washington. And crime spread to all of those areas. There were shootings down the street from the White House. There were muggings a block from the White House. Things that used to not happen started happening. So now they've upped the police presence in those areas because that's where congressmen live. That's where the tourists go. So the congressmen and the tourists and the White House, they all feel safe now. But on the south side of D.C., it's always the south side, isn't it? On the south side of D.C., that's where all the mayhem still is. The gang violence, the shootings, the murders, the robberies. Go to the Nationals Park. The baseball team down there in the Anacostia region, crime's bad around there. Had a member of Congress carjacked there recently. Member of Congress carjacked. Had another member mugged on Capitol Hill, on the south side of Capitol Hill. People don't feel safe in D.C. Violent crime has spiked there. New Orleans is another one. Philip has never been to New Orleans, and I got to go to New Orleans in a couple of months. I got a meeting I got to arrange in New Orleans. And New Orleans is they've had a horrible time keeping police. Crime in New Orleans has spiked. Now, New Orleans has always been a city with crime in certain areas, but it spilled over into the French Quarter, into Magazine Street, in the Garden District, where a lot of well-to-do people live, a lot of tourists go. They've tried to keep those areas safe. Hasn't worked. Hasn't worked. They got to have more police. Turns out having more police and letting them enforce the crimes is a good thing. Now, as I promised at the end of the show here, I got to jump back to the hearing with Robert Hur. He's still testifying, and the Democrats have been trying to score points, and they haven't done a good job scoring points. They've been trying to essentially say that, well, you think Biden's bad, Trump is worse, and you've exonerated him. This is Congresswoman Jayapal.
So this lengthy, expensive, and independent investigation resulted in a complete exoneration of President Joe Biden. For every document you discussed in your report, you found insufficient evidence that the president violated any laws about possession or retention of classified materials. The primary law that you analyzed for potential prosecution was part of the Espionage Act, 18 U.S.C. 793E, which criminalizes willful retention or disclosure of national defense information. Is that correct?
Congresswoman, that is one statute that we analyzed. I need to go back and make sure that I take note of the word that you used, exoneration. That is not a word that
I'm
appears
going to
in the
continue
report,
with my questions. I'm going to continue with my questions. I know that the term
I ultimately reached
I know that
whether
the term
sufficient evidence existed such that the likely outcome
you exonerated
a conviction.
I know that
the
term willful retention has a Mr. Hur, it's my time.
She doesn't want him to say, well, he didn't exonerate him. We found that his memory's too bad to stand trial. And then there's the Adam Schiff encounter with Mr. Hur.
I need to address something that you said in your prior question. What you are suggesting is that I needed to provide a different version of my report that would be fit for public release. That is nowhere in the rules. I was to prepare a confidential report that was comprehensive and thorough of an explanation.
What is in the rules, Mr. Hur, what is in the rules is you don't gratuitously do things to prejudice the subject of an investigation when you're declining to prosecute. You don't gratuitously add language that you know will be useful in a political campaign. You were not born yesterday. You understood exactly what you were doing. It was a choice. You certainly didn't have to include that language. You could have said vis-a-vis the documents that were found at the university, the president did not recall. There is nothing more common. You know this. I know this. There is nothing more common with a witness of any age when asked about events that are years old to say, I do not recall. Indeed, they're instructed by their attorney to do that if they have any question about it. You understood that. You made a choice. That was a political choice. It was the wrong choice. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Arizona, did special counsel wish to respond to that final question?
Yes, Congressman, what you are suggesting is that I shape, sanitize, omit portions of my reasoning and explanation to the Attorney General for political reasons.
No, I suggest that you not shape your report for political reasons, which is what you did.
That did not happen, Congressman. That did not happen.
The Democrats are doing their best to defend Biden here. It just doesn't work because we've now got the transcript. Biden literally couldn't remember which year his son died. And he was trying to excuse his memory lapses and behaviors because of his son's illness, and yet those behaviors came years after his son's death. That doesn't make Biden look good no matter what the Democrats do. What also doesn't make Joe Biden look good is Bidenomics, and I think they know it now that they've dropped the phrase after wrapping him in the phrase, and Americans for Prosperity went out and bought the domain. I still can't believe that the Democrats did not buy Bidenomics.com, even to keep it off the market. They didn't have to build a website with it. But instead, they chose not to do it. And now Americans for Prosperity has bought Bidenomics.com. You can go to Bidenomics.com. I'll do it for you right now. Bidenomics.com. And you see, Bidenomics is bad economics. If you ask Americans what they think about the U.S. economy, they'll tell you things aren't good. Americans are stressed about the family budget. They worry about falling behind financially. They feel like they've worked so hard to earn, and it could be gone at an instant. But if you ask President Biden, he says the economy couldn't be better. Here are the facts. And they take Joe Biden's quotes about the economy and they put up the reality. This is a great website for you to teach your friends and family why Bidenomics is bad and why Joe Biden's not being truthful about the economy. Bidenomics.com is the website, Bidenomics.com. It's brought to you by Americans for Prosperity, who had the foresight and genius to go out and buy the website when the Democrats didn't buy up that domain. Just another example of political malpractice by the Democrats, which was capitalized on by the great capitalists at Americans for Prosperity. You can go check it out at Bidenomics.com. Well, for those of you listening in Georgia, there is some breaking news. Governor Brian Kemp has told Greg Bluestein of the Atlanta Journal that he intends to sign his school choice measure at the end of this legislative session, saying there are no more next years. It's my hope we'll get this done this year. And yes, we'll be aggressively pushing for that. The governor of the state of Georgia coming out in favor of school choice in the state of Georgia. You know what's so crazy here is that this school choice program is considered the weakest of all the ones drafted nationally. It will not affect that many kids in the state of Georgia, mostly in urban areas. In fact, overwhelmingly in urban areas, something like 98, 99% of the kids who would benefit from it would be in urban areas. And yet it's rural Republican legislators in Georgia who are blocking the legislation. And they're blocking it because the school districts in their counties are the largest employers, and the school superintendents are badgering them and threatening to fine people to run against them if they don't support it, among other things. And it doesn't even affect those counties. But the public school district superintendents see the writing on the wall. If this is successful, it could spread statewide, and so they're trying to kill it by pressuring these rural Republicans. So in Georgia, like in Texas, it is rural Republicans who are blocking the school choice measures. In Texas, they all got primaried. In Georgia, qualifying is going to wrap up, it looks like, before they put this to a vote. And there won't be challengers for these guys, which maybe they'll take advantage of. But the governor in Georgia is throwing his weight behind the school choice measure, saying he intends to push to get it done. I hope the members of the state legislature in Georgia actually do side with the governor and do advance school choice. Americans for Prosperity, one of my advertisers, they're running billboards all over the state in those counties letting local Republicans know their representatives are opposed to it. And in fact, it's the Republicans in Georgia who are pressuring their local representatives. Even in some of these rural counties, got a lot of Republicans who intuitively understand school choice is a great thing. And actually, the states that have passed school choice have become more Republican. Black and Hispanic voters in states where there's school choice tend to vote Republican more often. Why? Because Democrats campaign against it, and they realize their kids will be pulled out of the private schools they're in and put back in public schools, and they don't want that. So they start voting Republican. It's a huge way to build a Republican Party. And so in places like Florida is probably the best example, Black and Hispanic parents have trended GOP on the issue of school choice. So you bring it to Georgia, a state that's become allegedly a purple state, and you got this great opportunity to move the state to the right with non-white voters. So good for Governor Kemp in Georgia, standing up strong for school choice. And Greg Abbott in Texas has as well primaried a bunch of Republicans. 74% of the Republicans that got primaried on school choice lost or went into a runoff. This is a winning issue for the GOP and a losing issue for Republicans who oppose it. Learn the right lesson, people.